All right, so the thing about this quote is that God doesn't play favorites. If you think about it, there's like a quantum soup of love. God is not a test of love. God's love is not a test for any one of us. Everything is built as a default into the karmic imprint of our souls. So we're accountable for our own souls, for our own actions. Their consequences are not so much about good and evil. It's more about consequences. So God's not up there saying, oh, Dave was not very good today. What can I do to him to put him in line? And that's what's so difficult about karma, because you see people who are really doing terrible things and nothing's happening to them. But never mind. With time, remember, there's no time on the other side. It's all going to catch up with them. So we've gone through this triad. We went from ego and self-cherishing and persona to desirous attachment, and these are sort of shades of the same thing, really. And Trevor's put them as one in the DVD. So if you do go to the DVD late in January or next year, then you don't have to watch the whole thing. It's too long. They'll be on one thing, but they're pretty much the same sort of energy. It's just different colors of the same chameleon. Here we have judgment, which is going a little bit differently to something that's actually more serious, more harmful to our karma, and I'll show you why, or at least I hope to show you why. Remember, in the background we always have a shadow, the evil inclination, which we have to subordinate to the good inclination. We have tricksters we're going to talk about next year, which we have to subordinate to our spirit guides. We have monkey mind, which we have to subordinate to big mind, spacious mind. We've talked about those things. So this one says, great are the righteous, for they transform judgment into compassion. Judgment is necessary. We have to judge, but we have to judge compassionately. In a sense, it's kind of like the Buddha talked about. We want to have compassion, have empathy, alleviate human suffering. That's the path of the Bodhisattva. It's the most difficult thing of all, and that's why I think it stands apart from the other two talks we've given. There's nobody here in this room who doesn't have a problem with that, And in this sense, you teach what you need to learn, and that's what I'm trying to learn myself. So this is the tree of life. You've seen it before, but the interesting thing is, if you look at this side, and I don't know why, whenever I do a diagram, it always slightly off. This is truth and love on this side, expansion. This is contraction and fear. And these are the 5 loves. This is Keter, which is connection with the Godhead. This is wisdom. This is mercy. This is non-attachment that we talked about. And love, the 5 loves. But on the opposite side are the 5 judgments, but they're also sometimes called the 5 fears. Understanding, judgment, attachment, ego, and kingdom earth, where we are in our bodies in the sentient existence on the planet. And in a sense, we've talked about information, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom all going up at a higher level. And when we attach to our opinions, it can be a problem. When we think we know the truth, like we see with our politicians today, and we hold to the truth so severely, the ancestors say, truth is just ego holding to its own image frequently, and that's what we're seeing a lot every day. And it's sad because it pushes us into these 5 judgments much too easily, and it pushes us into a fear vibration, and where we really should be in a love vibration. But this is the triangle we dealt with before. It's interesting, now we're going to deal with this triangle, which is different and at a higher level up the tree. So we're getting now more into the heart chakra. This is more into the foundation ego chakra. So that's why it's getting more difficult, more challenging. And the answer is forgiveness, empathy, or what the ancestors call sweetening the judgments. When we judge, maybe don't judge severely, and we'll see why that's a good thing. This is what we're going to cover today. Judgment. Okay, if you judge and nobody knows about it, you're pretty much harming yourself. But are we harming others with our judgment? Self-criticism is a paradox about that. It doesn't make you perform better. It actually makes you perform worse. The more you beat yourself up about something, the worse you perform. We'll talk about illness a bit. Covetousness. Remember, there's only 10 commandments. One is do not covet your neighbor or anything that belongs to your neighbor. This is taking judgment to another level. If we take it a further step, which is the evil eye, the evil tongue, the evil inclination, which is talked about in Kabbalah, these three differentiations, you get witchcraft. And when you have witchcraft, you have revenge. And this is really serious stuff. And this is around, never mind going to indigenous societies. It's present in every single society, and people want to believe that it doesn't exist, but it does, and it's worth knowing about. And then lastly, at the end of the talk, the last half, or the last third, we're going to talk about what judgment does to our subconscious and how toxic it can be to the way our subconscious works. So this is Confucius, who says, when you see a worthy person, endeavor to emulate him or her. When you see an unworthy person, then examine your inner self. There's the saying that when you point a finger at somebody, there are always three fingers pointing back at you. So we would be unable to make an opinion or a judgment of anybody if it wasn't part of our own psyche, of our own evil inclination, of our own shadow. So what we do is we project our own shadow onto others to make us feel better about ourselves, and frequently we have the same malady. Sometimes we don't. We actually can see something in somebody else that seems pretty toxic, but we've got another thing that's toxic. So why not just make a trade? Think of all the things maybe that come out of this talk, and when we judge people, then say, hey, I'm judging, because you can't not judge. You have to just be aware you're judging. Hey, I'm judging. What am I judging here? Is it part of me? And not really. It's part of them. I'm not there. But this is part of me, and let's make a trade. Let go of your judgment of that person and move on. It might be a little old lady driving in the fast lane. That gets to me because I'm very impatient. What's the matter with this person? She shouldn't have a license. They should take. But back off and say, be more patient. You have a problem with patience. Work on it. Take care not to give scandal nor to do harm. Remember, when you judge normally, you're not necessarily doing harm. But when you judge a certain way, you can cause a lot of damage, and we're going to talk a lot about that as well. We can judge ourselves, and that's not good. We can judge another, and that's not good. And we can judge others as a collective, and we're seeing this now. This racial group is bad. These people are evil. And it's never been more prevalent. The last time I remember this was in the 1940s and 30s when Hitler came to power. And this is all fear-based, because what happened, Goebbels said, he was Hitler's propaganda person. He said, if you instill fear into people, you can make them do anything. And that's what's going on now today. So when you judge others and you talk about others, then it spreads like wildfire. And this is what's going on now because of social media. So there's a lot of harm that can be done, and we have to look at that as well. Kabbalah says when you judge and you talk about somebody, you gossip about somebody to another person, you kill three people. You kill yourself karmically and your subconscious, as we'll see. You kill the other person, and you kill the person who you're talking about. Kill in parentheses. So I think it's important for us to understand the different levels of what happens when we judge. There's a paradox of self-criticism. If you take it down the line here, self-criticism we all do all the time, and then it might be self-recrimination, pretty much the same thing. But when it gets to self-condemnation, the ancient wisdom says self-condemnation is the single biggest impediment on the enlightenment path. And I would say self-condemnation is the single biggest impediment on the health path. Really, if you don't feel you deserve to be well, you won't be well. We're going to talk about that separately. Then we have guilt, which is a little bit stronger, and then we have shame, which is actually a crippling emotional force, which can cause depression, can cause soul loss, can cause addiction patterns, and can cause even suicide. So soul loss is at another whole level, and sometimes when people are ashamed, they can either be in denial and just rub it off, or not. And sometimes when they are not in denial and they really are ashamed, it can be a crippling force. In the indigenous societies, it's always treated collectively, never singly, as a society, which is much more powerful. Belief that you are bad and belief you're out of control makes you more so, not less so. I used to think if I beat myself up, I'd perform better. But I would have enjoyed medical school a lot more if I would have had teachers who weren't always trying to shame us into learning more strongly. If they maybe inspired us, it would have been more reasonable. The other thing that used to happen was I used to imagine myself, we used to have a board where they would paste the people who passed the examination. And in order to make myself study more, I used to imagine myself going up to the board and not seeing my name on there. And then I would go for another hour or two. It worked, but it's not as good as really wanting to, having a love vibration and wanting to learn the work. It's a fear response. Guilt can occur even without wrongdoing. Many of us, especially the healer archetype, take on stuff that doesn't belong to us, and the ancestors say, release yourself from what you are not accountable for. We are responsible for, but are not our actions. So we have to own up to to being unskillful and admit to it, but just treat ourselves gently like we would treat a good friend. You're not going to say, oh, you're an idiot, why did you do this, and so on. Just say, no, I'm going to do better next time, it won't happen again. Universal self-acceptance, USA. It's kind of like for yourself, universal self-acceptance is really important. None of us are perfect. Now, what about illness, self-hexing, and guilt? A lot of folks, there are many, many causes of fear. Two important ones are religious and superstitious. I don't deserve this, I'm guilty, I've sinned, God is going to punish me. And a lot of people that have a belief system that's a little bit off believe that maybe sickness is a sin that they've perpetrated and that they don't deserve to get better. They won't get better. So the inner healer is paralyzed when it feels that you in yourself, in your inner self, your life force doesn't deserve to be well. We all deserve to be well, and we talked about last time about paddling our little boat down the river of life between the bank of attachment and non-attachment. We all want to have a decent boat that's not too full of leaks, that we're not plugging the whole time, so we can do our job. Our job is to get to the end of the river with the best possible karma, not to be sitting on our couch saying, no, I don't deserve to be well, I've done something wrong. Amazing how many people feel that. Change the thought process, which is perpetuating a problem. So that those of us that are healers that encounter people like this, we have to give them corrective advice. This is not good for you. A problem that does not need to exist and may actually aggravate the whole problem, paralyze the inner healer. The inner healer is part of the soul, and it's very subject to the way we think about ourselves. So let's take the judgment to another level. Harm yourself, we've talked about that, self-condemnation. Harm another, we'll talk about that. Harm others, and we're really getting to gossip here. And we talked last time about desirous attachment. When you combine judgment with desirous attachment, in other words, we want something that somebody else has, we would like somebody who has something that we don't have not to have it, and we wish them harm, then we are coveting. It's a very powerful thing. It's got serious karmic consequences. If you think, there are only 10 commandments, this happens to be one, a very important one. Coveting leads to harm, and we're going to see how that happens. Do not covet. Basically, witchcraft comes from a heart of envy. I remember my teacher, saying, "What's a witch?" He told me when I was doing my initiation. A witch is somebody who is jealous, has a jealous heart, and they don't want you to have something, or they want to have what you've got. And there are a lot of people in indigenous societies, instead of going to a dishonest lawyer, they go to a witch when they feel they've been wronged, but they also go to a witch when they're coveting. So it's not unusual for somebody to go to fancy somebody else's wife, and he'll go to a witch and say, "Look, I really would like to be with that woman. Can you make it happen for me?" It works. Don't think it's superstitious. If you go and you speak to white people in South Africa, they say, "Oh, witchcraft only works in black people because they believe in it." It works in both ways, but it works more powerfully in black people because of the belief system, and we'll see how that works. So a heart of envy is not a good thing. And how does this manifest? Firstly, the evil eye. That's, somebody, say, in the workplace who resents you because maybe you're better than them at your work, maybe you're the same as them or not even as good, but the boss likes you and favors you, and they haven't quite got to backstabbing you, which we'll talk about, but they envy who you are, and therefore they bad vibe you, and it doesn't feel good. One needs to be protected from that bad vibe. It's not a good thing. They're essentially wishing you ill, and if they have spiritual power, which a lot of people have, and they don't even know they have it, it's going to be even more powerful. I remember Larry Dossey talking about an instance where he had somebody who said that her father, whenever he wished somebody ill, something bad would happen to them. He wasn't a sorcerer or witch, but he obviously had powerful dark forces who were helping him with his ideas. So the evil eye can be extremely hazardous to other people. If you take it up a step, the evil tongue is you can absolutely assassinate somebody's character with gossip with the evil tongue. There's a story about a rabbi in a European village, and some of you might have heard this way back, but it's always worth repeating. And this rabbi lived in a little community, and he was the pillar of the community. And one day, one of his congregants saw him going into a stall in the market and helping himself to food and vegetables and fruit and walking out without paying. There was nobody in the stall. So he spread the rumor that the rabbi was a thief and they should not have him anymore as a spiritual leader. And they ostracized the guy and kicked him out of the community. And then one day, this fellow who gossiped, he saw this rabbi now become a woodcutter, and he was sort of laboring under this huge load of wood. And he really felt bad, and he thought he should go and speak to the rabbi and explain what happened. So he goes to the door and he knocks on the door, and the rabbi comes there and he says, I want to tell you that I'm the person who told the community that you were stealing food from that market on a Friday afternoon. And the rabbi shook his head and said, I wish you'd come to me and discussed it with me, because that store belonged to my brother-in-law, who gave me permission every Friday to come and get food and whatever I wanted. So the guy feels terrible, he says, oh my gosh, well, what can I do to repent? He says, go and write your apology and what you've done on a piece of paper and tear it up into as many pieces as you can. And then you see that hill over there, when it's a windy day, go on top of the hill and throw all the pieces into the wind. And the fellow says to him, thank you, Rabbi, it's so generous of you to forgive me. Hang on a second, I'm not finished. He says, when you go and you pick up every piece of paper, then you have corrected what's happened. Now, to the rabbi, I'm sure he was forgiven, but karmically you are not forgiven. And that's why it's very important to forgive, especially the ones that we love, like our parents. And that's why there's a commandment that says, honor your mother and father. It doesn't say like them, that your days will be long upon the earth, because they'll hang around the living if you haven't forgiven them, because they're faced with terrible karmic consequences. So the evil tongue is a serious, serious problem. And now with social media, you can imagine how it's propagating in so many ways. The evil inclination is basically a witch or a sorcerer, and when I say witch, I mean the dark side of witchcraft. Of course, in Western countries, there's Wicca, which is the light side of being a witch, and then there's the dark side of being a witch. But in Africa, if you're a witch, it's always dark. They don't have you're either a witch or you're a Sangoma or a Nyanga. And some of those Sangomas and Nyangas are working with witchcraft as well, which is not good. So the evil inclination is when somebody who has a heart of envy has powerful spirits, or not so powerful spirits, maybe just trickster spirits, who want to work with them from the other side and help them with their bad intentions. Just like a psychic or a shaman or a healer or Sangoma has spirit guides on the light side who are working with them to do healing and curing and helping, the witch is doing the exact opposite. There has to be both. You cannot just have good, so people who don't believe in this, they believe in it or they love it when they go and watch Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or Darth Vader and all those kind of things, but not otherwise. So these are the three partitions that sort of work quite well in terms of everything. Now, some of you might have seen, but it's an important slide. I don't want to talk so much about placebo, the power of belief to help and to heal and to cure, which is a love vibration. The power of distant healing. We now know that distant healing, distant prayer works whether you believe in it or not, whether you know about it or not. The double-blind studies showing you take a group of patients and some of them get standard therapy, the others get standard therapy plus healing or prayer. The ones who get prayer or healing do much better than the others. So much so, if you could bottle it into a pill, you'd be negligent for not giving it. But nobody really pays much attention to that. But if this is true, this is also true, this distant hexing. If you wish people well and you have spiritual forces working with you, the people who are in these studies were usually healers. Oh, that's a nice Celtic tune. We're going to have one later. People that were expert healers and they had power, but so are witches. Now, if you look at this is a field effect. It's working directly on the inner healer, on the life force of the person through the field. And this belief system works directly with knowledge, with knowing on the inner healer. The opposite of placebo is nocebo, the power of belief to hurt, harm, or to kill you. And this is why witchcraft works much more powerful in indigenous societies, because they believe in it. These people, the white folks in South Africa I'm talking about, don't believe in it, and therefore they don't. When something terrible happens to them and their car goes off the road and they have a terrible accident, they just think, oh, that was a coincidence. Or suddenly their wife leaves them and they say, oh, wonder why that happened. Weird stuff happens, and we always attribute it to something else. Now, there's another thing here, which is guilt. Now, if there's a lot of self-judgment, for instance, in South Africa, all of us who've worked in the field know of at least one instance where somebody will come to their employer, an African will come to their employer and say, I'm going home to die, I'm sick. And the employer says, no, well, let me take you to my doctor and we'll check you out. So he takes him to the doctor. He has a full workup. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this young, robust man. And he says, but you're fine. You don't need to go home to die. You're not going to die. No, I'm going home to die. I'm sick. He doesn't tell his white boss what's happened to him because he knows he won't believe him anyway. Goes home, and then 2 months later, the boss gets a letter from the family saying, I just want to tell you, Mr. Smith, that Johannes really liked working for you and he thought you treated him very well. I just want you to know that he died. And then the guy says, wow, that's kind of weird. This is a combination of nocebo, the person knowing that they've been bewitched, he has been bewitched, and the fact that he's probably done something bad. The same thing about healing. When you don't feel you deserve to be well, you won't be well. Say he took somebody else's wife and slept with them, or he screwed them over in business or something. And when you know, and he's obviously a fairly honest person, is not in denial, otherwise he might have gone to a more powerful witch and bewitched the witch and killed the witch, but didn't do that for whatever reason, goes home and dies. Now, obviously you don't necessarily die, but bad stuff can happen because of nocebo, guilt, self-recrimination, and distant hexing. Now, revenge, in the scriptures it says, revenge is mine, saith the Lord. So let's look a bit at that. And this is also more in the New Testament, but it's in the Old as well. Do not give the devil a foothold. Now, I don't know if you remember this little scene in Star Wars where Darth Vader is fighting his son, and Sith, who's obviously the metaphor for Lucifer, the devil, is trying to make Luke Skywalker get angry. He says, if you want to beat him, you must hate him. You must get angry. You have to use hate. And Luke knows that the minute he does that, he loses. Because you cannot fight dark with dark. Not powerful dark. You have to fight dark with light. So this has, it's very, very pithy. It's a very, very, it's an amazingly archetypal, true movie series. Then again, do not repay anyone evil for evil. You cannot bewitch a witch. Very bad karma, extremely bad karma. It happens all the time in indigenous societies, but you can't do it. The only thing you can do is sort of use the Aikido model, is to use the energy of that person to send it back to them. if you think of the martial arts of Aikido. You're not trying to hurt the person, you're just using their energy against them. So the idea is to block it like a mirror, and or reflect it back, but never try and wish the other person evil. Turn the other cheek is really what Jesus meant when he meant turn the other cheek. He didn't mean if somebody hits you, go and turn the other, hey, hit me again. That's absurd. It's a metaphor for just saying, walk away, don't, if you resist it and you try to confront it, something bad's probably going to happen to you that you don't want to happen, especially today. Don't get mad at anybody and, who cuts you off and hoot or something. They might turn around and shoot you. It's not a good thing, especially in LA. Remember, karma will reconcile all grievances. So we don't have to judge. In a way, we have to have a little bit of compassion for the situation that person is in. Is if we can have compassion and think of what it is that caused them to be that way, then it might be easier to be in the light with it rather than to be in the dark. Now let's talk a little bit about treatment. How are we going to deal with all these things? When a deep injury is done to us, we never recover until we forgive. This is absolutely true, is that not only true spiritually, but it's true in terms of ancient wisdom coming into alignment with neuroscience. When you forgive somebody, you basically take the albatross around your neck off, you free yourself up, you feel better. When you hold on to something, you never really are going to be healed. You're never going to be completely okay. They've shown now with studies that if you forgive, it bumps up your immune cells. Actually, there's a study I've also quoted it before, with AIDS patients, where the AIDS patient who was given the virus by somebody who forgave the person who gave them the virus, which is a huge thing to be able to do, actually do much better. Their T cells are much higher and they live much longer. Lack of forgiveness, cynicism, that's sort of the opposite, creates an increase in pro-inflammatory factors. Your white cell count, your cytokines, your interleukins. Inflammation now is thought to be one of the main culprits for certain cancers and for the increasing number of autoimmune diseases that are around. So forgiveness is healthful and it's spiritual as well. It's a good thing for your karma. We must support emotionally without condoning. You must acknowledge what is wrong so as not to impair conscience. Now, this is all very well, but those of us who have kids know that it doesn't always work. And even with friends, you have to support emotionally but not condone. But I would say that this is that my experience is ask permission before you say anything. And if you see somebody acting in a certain way that you're close to, whether it's a child or whoever, a friend, without volunteering, you might just ask to say, look, would you like some feedback about what I heard about this or what you just said? And then if they say yes, then you have permission to go ahead and do it. Otherwise, you're probably not going to be successful. You're going to create a lot of anger. We had an ancestor, Mary Ellen Kelly and I, who used to do this work together, who used to say to us, if you were to ask and I was to answer, this is what I would say. We hadn't asked, but I think the best what we can do, it is very clever, is to ask permission before you venture in. You must acknowledge what is wrong so as not to impair conscience. So you cannot enable, you actually hurt the person by enabling. Acting contrary to conscience is different from justifying and rationalizing a wrongdoing. The latter compounds, not merely worsens. So it's like compound interest. It influences, endangers future decisions and actions. That's probably the root of narcissism. So if you just see, we have so many examples to look at. But if we look at our president, I don't know what compounded him, but he cannot actually even recognize any fault within himself. And just look at what's going on. It's just interesting to me, not to talk about politics here, but it's so much to learn from what's going on rather than get frustrated. Use it as a learning opportunity rather than as some reason to hate or to get upset and have a stroke. Now this is from Hillel. He said, actions arise from conditions. Do not judge then the former until the latter is well understood. If you have eaten what the judged one has eaten, and worn his clothes, and thought his thoughts, and felt both his joy and pain, then you may say you have stood in his place, but only briefly, compared to the length of his stay. So still you may not know the past or present plights that plague him. Our judgments are frequently fraught with error and usually tainted with arrogance. Compassion and love are our salvation and joy. So this is a little bit like the Native American, walk in another person's moccasins. It's just a little bit more detailed. But this is from Goethe, who said, the way you see people is the way you treat them. And the way you treat them is what they become. If you mistrust your employee, they are going to be mistrustful, because they're going to feel, doesn't trust me, so why should I bother? If you mistrust your kids, watch out. You must trust them. Don't enable them, but trust that they are good kids. Now, the other thing that I often did with my groups, there are 3 doshas. If you look at Ayurveda, that's the yoga science of health. There are 3 mind-body types, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And the mind-body type is more, it's not quite a genetic imprint, but it's kind of similar to that. It's more sophisticated than endomorph, ectomorph, mesomorph. But for instance, the Vata persons are really high energy people. They eat a lot, they never gain weight, and so on. And the Kapha people tend to be, more indolent. They often are get up late. They tend to gain weight. They have low energy. It's easy for a Vata person to criticize a Kapha person and vice versa. But it's part of their mind-body makeup. It's just who we are. So we all have it's a bit like the thing I was talking about before, about projecting our shadow onto somebody else. We shouldn't project our mind-body dosha onto somebody else either. Sometimes a nice thing to go and look them up. See what dosha you are. Sometimes we're a mix of more than one dosha. The thing to do with the Ayurvedic medicine is to make sure that you stay in as much balance as possible, knowing what your weaknesses are and what problems you have in your dosha. It's kind of an interesting science. The ancestors say we are all one, though not the same. So if we're all made of stardust, we're all made of carbon atoms, as above, so below. So all of us, all the still beings, the growing beings, the wild beings, and us, the speaking beings, we're all made of the same stuff. We just are vibrating at different levels. We're all animated by the breath of the Creator at different vibrations. And we're all going to end up the same way, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. So, Roshi said that the fundamental delusion of humanity is to suppose that I am here and you are out there. And Dhammapada said, if you see yourself in others, then whom can you hurt? What harm can you do? The yoga saying, Namaste, I see the God in you. There's an African Zulu word called Ubuntu, which means I'm only a person through another person, through other people. We all inter-are, as Thich Nhat Hanh said. So there's no time anymore, especially now. We're all like in a rickety boat in a stormy sea. We owe each other terrible loyalty, is what some anonymous guy said. It's time to really be careful because things are getting pretty bad. So it's about interconnectedness, not separation. Unity versus duality. Being infinite versus finite. Remember the Zohar said, I said last time, that we are living in a 1% world. There's a 99% world out there, in the field, in the spirit world. Rumi said, out there beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. If we can get away from the wrongdoing and the right doing type of thing, it'll help us immeasurably. I had a dream once when it said, the ancestor said it turned into a song. When you no longer need to be right, the purity of your soul will shine through. So when we are judging, we are affecting our soul. Do not spread, this is Chofetz Chaim. He had 9 principles, but I'm only giving you the most important ones. Do not spread a bad image of anyone or any group, even if true, or to the person himself. Now, if the person asks you, what do you think, then we talked about that. Now, it's interesting because the Buddha says in his precepts, do not talk about anybody unless you know it to be true. Well, this goes beyond that. Don't even talk about somebody. I think if you look at it, put the two things together, I would say, don't talk about something or somebody unless you know he can or she can do harm to you. And then it's important to spread the word. Watch out for this person because you might get harmed. But then it might be, it's your own projection. You were harmed for some other reason. But, there's usually a pattern. So when you want to know that it's really true, you should be sure that you've got all the information. Do not share information that can cause harm, which is essentially gossip. Do not embarrass even in jest. Do not pretend that innuendo or body language are not speech. There was a study once where they studied couples, married couples and other couples, and they looked at what were the things that were the biggest prognostic factors that were going to determine whether the couple stayed together. Anybody want to suggest what it might be?
Holding hands. Holding hands.
No, what's going to suggest a bad thing? A bad thing. Rolling of the eyes, If people, your partner is talking about something and you're rolling your eyes, it's a deadly prognostic sign. So do not pretend that innuendo or body language are not speech. Don't refrain from judging. We have to judge. That's why there are those two, mercy and judgment on the tree of life. Don't refrain from judging. Do not judge harshly, judge favorably. Sweeten the judgments. Reality usually follows its description. Remember, we all have our own story. There are many, many stories. Indigenous people have no trouble with other people having a story. They know that truth is in the present moment, and often the opposite is true. They live in paradox, which is it's a good thing to live in paradox. So reality will follow its description. Hence, it is ever-changing and is perceived differently by different people. So you may have hurt somebody because their reality is so completely different to you. And if you spoke to 100 people, they would say, no, you're right, this person shouldn't be hurt because of that. You didn't mean it. But what you can still do is you can apologize and say, I'm sorry I hurt you. Rather than justify and say, but I didn't do anything wrong. And somehow that person's reality, his story is different to yours. You can always apologize. You don't have to take blame for it. Just say, I'm sorry I hurt you. I didn't mean it. Because of differing realities. So these are two methods, or one method really, that some of you are familiar with. You're probably all familiar with Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. But there's actually a foundation in Ojai where Zimmerman and Coyle pretty much wrote the book on the indigenous concept of council circle, which is really a Native American thing. But it's also in all indigenous societies. The Zulus have what they call indaba. And council circle is essentially like passing the peace pipe, and now everybody knows about that. Even kids in school are doing it. And the principles are very clear and very simple, but not that easy. Is that speak from the heart, the truth as you know it, but speak from the heart, not from the head. We're always, we as Westerners, because of our education, we're always self-justifying. We want to look good, we want to be smart, we want to look clever. So we don't do that well in council circle, many of us, because we're trying to posture ourselves. Speak from the heart, the truth as you know it, and speak about feelings. Feelings are, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm thirsty. Those are feelings. So when I used to talk to my groups about it, when I took groups, and I still do sometimes, we would always, council circle was the primary way of communicating in the group. Always, at the end of the day, we had council circle to diffuse problems. If you put a like or a that in front of the statement, it's not a feeling. So for our example I would give is, we go on a hike and there's a promise of water and there was no water, and there was a promise of a swim and there wasn't, and it was supposed to be a cool day and it was 100 degrees, and everybody comes back to council circle and they're all exhausted and miserable. And this didn't happen, but I just made it up now. And one of the guys takes the stick and he says to me, I feel that Dave is an asshole. That's not a feeling, because he's put a that or a like into the equation. I feel exhausted, I feel frustrated, I feel tired. is the feeling that somebody would express from that kind of a communication. Rosenberg's nonviolent communication went way beyond this. This is being used in schools, in jails, in all sorts of situations, council circle. But he took it on a global level between the Irish, and the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Hutus and the Tutus and the Tutsis at least, and he was very successful. So I wanted to just do a meditation now, and then we can take a break. And this is a Druid vow of friendship, which I think is very profound. So I put it to a song, and I left out this last one. But it says, I honor your gods, I drink from your well. Well, you don't have to drink from the well, but at least honor the story that another person has, even if it's not our story. I bring an unprotected heart to our meeting place, which is basically the principle of council circle. I hold no cherished outcome. I'm not attached to anything, And if we're talking about friendship here, which is what it's all about, this is what it's, I think it's probably one of the wisest things I've had about friendship. And this one I left out, I will not negotiate by withholding. How many of us do that, Where we withhold what we want to give so we can get something back in return, which means there's an attachment thing going on there. Just one thing about... somebody caught me at the break. The fact that you've forgiven somebody doesn't mean you have to have anything to do with them. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciling. So if you have somebody toxic that you don't want to have anything to do with, it could even be a loved one, then you should not negotiate any relationship. You're basically getting the albatross off your neck. Doesn't mean you have to have anything more to do with them. It's about you, not about them so much, although of course it helps them as well. But it doesn't mean you've got to reconcile. So we're going to talk about something that's a little more subtle and a little harder to kind of grasp and believe because it's subconscious. And a healer just came up in the break and said one of the things that physicians have trouble with is distant healing. And it's absolutely true. Something that we cannot feel or touch or use our senses with are problematic, which is the same thing with the subconscious. This is William James. He said, the greatest revolution of our generation is the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, and I'm talking now about monkey mind, narrow mind, survival mind that we talked about previously, but the mind will be programming our subconscious. So when we're changing the attitude of our mind, we're changing the attitude of our subconscious as well. And this can change the outer aspect of our lives. Now, of course, there are a lot of self-help groups out there making a lot of money and books out there like The Secret. And all the principles are true, but you'll see some of the fallacies because I think most of those principles were meant for spiritual growth, not for materializing a Porsche in your driveway. And the one thing they don't always concede is that the main thing about them is you have to believe. You have to have faith in order for it to work. And it's hard to believe you deserve a Porsche in your driveway when you've got a Chevy that's working just fine. So I think that's why a lot of people spend money on these, and I know a few of them, and they come back and their lives are just the same as they were before, and if not worse. And we'll see why those principles work, and we'll dissect them later. So when you talk to people, this is from the Talmud, when you talk to people, do not weigh. A soul that weighs suffers harm. A soul that's judging, all the time judging. Firstly, you're affecting your mind, and then by affecting your mind, you're affecting your subconscious, and at a very deep level, we're affecting the soul. This is Matthew, who takes it even further. Judge not that you not be judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. With what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. What he's almost implying here is that it's coming back to us like a mirror, that the soul is being affected, the subconscious is being affected, and we are subtly changing our soul technology in some way, and it's all reflecting back to us, which is kind of a scary thought. How do you get away from bad thoughts, and so on? Not easy. We create our own reality unknowingly through our subconscious. So this is, a lot of people have written about this and talked about it, and I'm just summarizing a lot of information here. Negative and judgmental thoughts imprint our subconscious and will return to us and negatively impact our progress, which is what Matthew is saying. Wish people well and the good will return to you. We talked last time about paying forward. So when you pay forward, you're actually paying forward to your subconscious as well. The subconscious is like a stenographer in the courtroom. It's recording everything there, and it doesn't have any sense of what's wrong or what's right. Its job is to record. It's a tape recorder, pretty much, the subconscious is. It doesn't have a sense of humor. It can't take a joke. So don't make a bad joke about yourself or about anybody else for that matter. You know, if you're self-recriminating yourself, it's going to go into your subconscious. It's easy to talk about. It's not so easy to work with. But this is real. No matter what we think, we will act on the background information residing in the subconscious. The subconscious records everything impartially. It can control our destiny. Thoughts bubble up from this basement of our being to control us. So we think our conscious mind is in control, but it's really not. Whatever's in our subconscious is what's going to really happen. Even though we think we're in control, we might be. At the end of the day, it's not going to actualize. Negative statements, once seated, execute in the background. Also in your dream time. So your dreams can be a way of looking at what your subconscious is thinking and helping you to correct things. The subconscious just accepts whether true or not. Beware of the seeds you plant. Turn the other cheek was what we talked about before, or respond positively. If you respond negatively, you inherit their energy. It's not about them, it's about you. Give compassion, imagine them changing for the better. The ancestors talk about making your opponent a partner in the dance, you know. If you're a bodhisattva or, you know, a Jesus-like personality, you can take criminal people and change them. You know, like Guthe was saying, if you treat people well, they change. If we talk well about them, they can change. But more importantly, if we talk well about them or don't judge, we don't impregnate our subconscious with negativity. Now, procedural memory. What's procedural memory? Procedural memory is when you drive home, you don't actually have to think about it. It's very efficient. You just get home, you actually don't even realize you're home, and you don't even remember where you went, and you're not even sure, but more than likely you went the same way you always went. Now, procedural memory can trip you up because maybe you were supposed to pick up milk on the way and then you forgot, so you've got to go back and get the milk. Or maybe you've moved your house and then you end up at the other house that you used to live at. So it can be inefficient as well. Habit is also a function of the subconscious. So procedural memory is not the same as cellular memory, but it's very similar in that you never forget how to ride a bicycle. You may not ride it quite as well as before, but that's what happens with procedural memory, and that's in a way what's going on in our subconscious. It's impregnated, it's imprinted there. So if you take it a bit further, and there's quite a lot of neuroscience on this, is that when you judge yourself badly, you actually imprison yourself. You put your brain into a lockdown mode. This is just the one aspect. I'll go on to the next one to do with a functional MRI as well. So they can see it on the functional MRIs. When you are condemning yourself or self-recriminating yourself, or you feel shameful or guilty, your brain goes into lockdown. It's almost like you're in survival mode. You're in the cave and the lion is circling the cave, and you don't know whether to fight or flight, which is a stress response. But remember, there's two other F's. There's flight, fight. There's also feign death or freeze. And those are the things we often do when there's shame and self-condemnation. The brain goes into a lockdown mode. But what happens with procedural memory is it's one step away from that. Is when you say you're, let's say that you suffer from the alcoholic syndrome. So the procedural memory is going to, when you've had stress especially, and your brain is in lockdown mode, and bad thing has happened, you're beating yourself up, you are cut off from your frontal lobe, from your notions, your high ideas, your your aspirations. You're in your primitive mid-zone of your brain, and the fellow with the alcoholic syndrome ends up driving past his favorite pub. And then he stops and he thinks, I've really had a bad day. Maybe I should just go in and speak to the bartender. This is procedural memory that's dysfunctional at the worst. This is addictive behavior, but it's also part of the subconscious. So what's the point of having a sponsor? That's when you call the sponsor and the sponsor says, hang on a sec, I'm coming out to give you a hand. Yeah, don't go in. Sometimes they do go in, they have a glass of water and they walk out, but it's taking a chance. It's not the way it should work. So we have to guard ourselves against all of these phenomena, and this is the one extreme, but most of us have other things that are much more subtle and not so easily corrected. So this is from the ancestors who say these manifestations, these thoughts, can be nothing less than divine beings, angels, concentrations of energy that constantly flit in and out of existence. We create them and bring them into being with our thoughts, our words, our deeds, our feelings, but can erase them in the same way. The opposite is also true. When we think good of other people, we are creating little pockets of positive energy, and these are like mini angels. And the ancestors compare us to, and this is also in the Zohar, compare us to marionettes, puppets, and we are connected to the supernal worlds by strings. And every time we think something good or we do something good, we practice random acts of kindness, we create positive energy above us. So our acts are not only affecting everything down here, they're affecting things up there as well. And the opposite is true. Just as easily we can create malevolent beings, negative energy demons who hinder us on the path of transformation. So there are spiritual effects that are in the supernal realm that we are having an effect on. They're having an effect on our talks, our words, or having an effect on our subconscious. And they're also programming our monkey mind, which is going to be adversely affecting our spacious mind. So this is sort of going really deeper and deeper as to the whole thing about judgment and the way we think and talk about ourselves or other people. Now this is a kind of a diagram that I did because this is us with these strings connecting us to the cosmos, and here are kind thoughts, feelings and acts which create positive vibes, and this comes back down to us. What comes around goes around as well. And unkind acts create negativity, and what comes around goes around. And we also are creating subconscious malware at the same time. So the consequences of bad words, bad talk, are much more sinister than we really think. We're doing a lot more damage than we think to our soul. Our thoughts, feelings, and actions all have connections, not just in the material world, but in the spiritual realm. This is the ancestors I've added here, and the subconscious. The spiritual influences the material. We invite, support, encourage, or exclude, reject, or discourage. So a good thing to do is practice random acts of kindness. It was funny, I was coming out of my office the other day, and there was a lady in a wheelchair, and her laces were not right. And the guy who was in front of me stopped, and he did up her laces for her. I would probably have walked right past, saying, he's not going to walk anyway, so why should I bother? But there's a positive effect, whereas mine would have been a negative effect. So it's not easy to do. Cosmic energy enters through the energy. This is more yoga. Cosmic energy enters through the energy, the etheric body. That's the body of prana. Remember we talked last time of the 5 sheaths of Patanjali that I always referred to. There's the body sheath, the outer one. Then there's the energy sheath, the one of prana, your energy. When you increase your energy sheath with spiritual practice, especially embodied spiritual practice, this is what happens. When cosmic energy enters through the energy body, and our thoughts will determine whether this is positive or negative, and how etheric body or prana, body of chi, body of prana, will be imbalanced or balanced. spiritual practice will encourage positive flow. So the yogis are looking at it from the same aspect, but when our energy body, our energy sheath is in good alignment, you've just come out of a yoga class, it's much easier to practice random acts of kindness than when you're under the gun. And then, of course, your mind body is going to also be controlled. Remember, the mind body and the energy body are vulnerable to spiritual practice, and that's the only way we can get into spacious mind, with a regular, enjoyable spiritual practice that's done for its own sake. So don't condemn others who are rich or lucky, honest or dishonest. Not easy these days. Do not covet or judge. You cannot attract what you condemn. The law of attraction. The law of attraction is about love energy, not about fear or condemnation. You cannot attract what you condemn. If your subconscious is imprinted that wealth is bad or not spiritual, you'll get the opposite. This is what Coué called the law of reversed effort. The law of reversed effort is like what some of us suffer from. Those of us, including myself, who grew up in not very financially successful circumstances, heard a lot of talk like, money is the root of all evil. Your money will never make you happy. Research shows that yes, money doesn't make you happy, but any rich person you talk to will tell you, I'm much happier that I've got it than that I don't have it. So a lot of us are imprinted with this when we grow up, and we're imprinted with things from our families, from our friends, from our culture, from our school, and it goes way, way back, and it's not so easy to correct. But if we imprinted that wealth is bad, and that's your subconscious, your conscious will never overcome your subconscious unless you make an effort to do that, and we'll see how you can do that. And this is what a lot of the folks who are doing these self-help groups are doing, is they're trying to help us with the subconscious so that we can actualize more wealth and more prosperity. The law of reversed effort, you get the opposite of what you pray for if your subconscious and your subconscious are not in agreement. So even though you think your conscious is wanting money and you're going out and you've been to the workshop, if at the root of all this your subconscious playing out money is the root of all evil, it's never going to come your way. Can I prove it? I don't think so, but it seems like it's pretty true. Imagination imprinted by the subconscious will overcome desire. This was Coué's plank theory. Coué was a Frenchman who lived a while back. And, if you imagine putting a plank between the chair and the stage and asking somebody to walk across the plank, not a problem, because worst thing will happen, you'll jump off if you lose your balance. But put the plank up, 1,000 feet up and have a drop on either side, your imagination is going to overcome your desire to go to the other side. I do a lot of backpacking and stuff. I don't like to go anywhere where if I fall, I die. That's my imagination. Now, other people are different. You have these crazy people who do these amazing things. Obviously, their imagination never had any fear of those things. Maybe their parents never said, "Oh, be careful, you're going to fall." And also they're athletically, brilliantly talented. But for most of us, our imagination that's imprinted by the subconscious is going to overcome desire unless we change it. Now, you can change it in dreams. For instance, if sometimes you find yourself in a dream, if you have a fear of heights, you can program yourself in the dream not to have fear of heights, and that'll help you when you're not in the dream. But that's more about lucid dreaming. The subconscious is subject to narrow mind's domination and prior experiences and lifetimes. So what is this about? So the Buddhists talk about store consciousness. Store consciousness is like the skeletons in the closet in our living room. The skeletons in the karmic closet of our past lives. The things that have imprinted on us that have come from past lives into the present as well. And they're sort of tucked away in the cupboard, but every now and then one of those skeletons comes out of the closet and sits on the couch next to you. And the only way you can overcome that is with spiritual practice, you know. And of course, the subconscious, I don't know where that skeleton resides. It might be in the subconscious. It might actually be in the conscious mind. Now, these are the remedies, you know. It's most impressionable, the subconscious, around sleep. I know somebody who's a bowler, a very good bowler, and she used to do tapes, you know. Bowler. No, it's my accent, what can I say? What's a plant? A plant. She's an expert bowler, and she used to play tapes before she went to bed. And usually they were music driven, so sensory meditation is more important, which the ancestors are always stressing. And the thing, even when she was asleep or partly asleep, is telling her how good she's going to be with her bowling. Now, it doesn't have to be sleep, it can be in a meditative state, which is just as good. Using sensory input and sensory imagination is incredibly powerful on your subconscious. So if you have any problems or challenges to do with your subconscious, this is the way to take care of it. Kuei had the mantra that you've all heard before: every day in every way I'm getting better and better at this or at that. And you can also, if you've got a detailed imagination, you don't have to go through the imagination all the time and all the detail. You can have a mantra, some other mantra that represents that imagination to you so that you know what you're talking about. But I want... I'm going to play golf. So I want to add another part about the ancestors, the spirit guides. I'm talking entirely about the subconscious here. But if we bring in our spirit guides and we bring in free will, you have to ask to receive. And the ancestors can help us with our subconscious and can help us with our desires and can help us with what we want, but they have to know exactly what we want. You cannot say, help me with my life in your imagination. You have to imagine exactly what you want, put it out into the field for the ancestors so that they can respond in kind, because that's what they do, that's their job. So we talked about this last week, but I want to take it to the next level because it has to do with the subconscious and it has to do with the spirit world, and especially with their ancestors. And those of you who want to read up more about ancestors and spirit guides, one of those DVDs is on the website that'll help you. So how do we actualize, how do we manifest? Anything in the spirit world begins with intention, attention to detail, action, affirmation. Those are the four pillars of it. So intention works much more powerfully when it's there with passion. How do you get passion? With sensory imagination. The senses, go into meditative state while being on the beach on a rock, listening to the waves, or play music at night before you go to sleep. Whatever gives you more passion that goes to your heart is going to give you stronger intention. So what's attention about? Well, I got 3 T's there. That's interesting. Attention is really important. It's about detailed imagination. The ancestors say, as you think it, so it can be. As you imagine it and as you believe it, so it will be. So imagination is a powerful force. So what you do is you either in a sleepy, around sleep, or in a meditative state, you put your intention and you put it in with all your imaginative attention to detail into the field, into the spirit world. Make it not about you. So if you want an island in the Bahamas, like you would maybe go to a forum for, and they're teaching you how to do that and how to actualize it, rather make the island in the Bahamas about some other mission that has nothing to do with your own self-interest but has to do with the good of others, a school for orphans or something on the island. Then you're out of the way, because if you're in the way with your own selfish motive, it's not going to have power in the spirit world. It might have some power in your subconscious, but not really if your subconscious doesn't really believe that's, because your subconscious probably doesn't believe in it. So make it not about you and be unattached to the outcome. This is really important, because if you're saying your mantra 100 times a day, every day in every way I'm going to be rich, I'm going to be rich, Your subconscious is saying to you, or to your you don't believe this. Why are you telling me so often, you know? And also we know that attachment has a stickiness to it. It repels things. It's certainly going to, you know, piss off your subconscious if you're saying this all the time and you're attached to it. It's also going to piss off the spirit world because they don't want attachment. You've got to release completely from any attachment to outcome. Here's the ringer. You've got to have belief and you have to have faith. And if it's not about you, it's much more likely that you're going to have faith that it's going to happen. So this is also important. You know, often the rituals I give people to do, you know, they don't kind of understand it. Why must I do so many? Why can't I do it once? Well, free will is in the present moment. And the ancestors are living in the present moment. There's no time up there. So the ancestors need to know, the spirit guides need to know, you want this today, do you want it next week, do you want it next month, do you want it 2 months from now? You've got to affirm. You have to affirm, maintain, sustain. They have to know you really, really mean it. That's where the intention is really important, and that's where the affirmation is important, but not, you know, in terms of the mantra, don't affirm it too much. You just keep contact with the ancestors through your spirit altar if you want, and if you're doing rituals, then fulfill them, because they're not going to work unless you connect through the ritual to the spirit world and you affirm. Don't do it once. Frequently I see people and they come for a reading and they've had an intrusive entity, and I say, it looks like you've got an intrusive entity around you. And she says, yes, and I went to see a psychic and they told me that, but she got rid of it for me. Well, she didn't, because you can't get rid of these things always in one session. It's going to require repeated sessions. They don't necessarily want to go away, or they go away and they come back, and so on. So that's the importance of affirmation. Now remember, let the universe handle the details. Like I said last week when I was talking about the healing center, Chisimani, at the end of the day, I lost the healing center, and everything turned out completely differently to what I really expected. But I got what I wanted, and at the end of the day, I lost what I wanted and I got what I needed. So don't expect your imagination to play out exactly like you see it. Let the universe handle the details. They know best what's there for you anyway. But be very specific about what you want, because they can't operate without that. So I want to just end with this. Be willing to give up who you are, the old familiar, for who you might become, to reach that which is beyond you. All that resides in monkey mind, spiritual practice. Subconscious, program it around sleep and in meditation. And then I think what we'll do is I'll leave the meditation for later, and then answer questions in case there's a lot of them. Last time there weren't that many, and then we can have a longer meditation. Any questions? Yeah.
But, a lot of this talk was about not putting out negative thoughts or energies or actions. In my opinion, sometimes there's a need to do negative things for the greater good. So maybe they're not considered negative as a net sum. So just as an example, when Hitler was there and people decided they would try to assassinate him while killing somebody, sort of against the rules, one of the 10 Commandments, and maybe those people were taking on karma, but the karma was for the better good.
No, there's no issue with that. The opposite is always true. That's why an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is just as real as turn the other cheek. It depends on the circumstances. You can't fight ISIS with love. But if you're fighting ISIS as a warrior, as a spiritual warrior, if you have hatred in your heart and vengeance in your heart, then there's a karmic consequence. But you're doing it for the greater good, so although there's a karmic consequence, it's not so serious. I think I talked last time about this friend I have of Special Forces, and he's, for those of you who weren't here, and I talked to him, stop me if I did, I know I've talked to others about it, but he was a sniper in the Special Forces, and he said that if he had hatred in his heart, he would miss. He had to have equanimity in his heart. But he said a friend of his who would bash down doors and kill terrorists used to say at night it kept him warm at night thinking about it. So both are true. Yeah, I don't have any issue with that at all. When it comes to evil, you have to sometimes fight it with severe force, but nevertheless, if you can do that more as an Aikido expert and not have so much hatred in your heart, it's going to be less karmically impactful. The good is that, the more hatred you have in your heart, the more effective it might be, and that's good for the rest of us. It might not be good for the guys doing it, though. Yeah. But I'm glad for that distinction. It's not about turning the other cheek and letting somebody hit you. He hits you either, if he's tougher than you, then walk away. If he's not, then hit him back, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah.
Is there a justification for criticism with a positive mind?
Yes, absolutely. That's the other thing is that, I try not to watch too much TV, but if you go to CNN, it's so important what they're doing. There's so much toxicity out there. There has to be a balance, So, and the way they do it is actually very nice. They always have the opposite opinion. I don't have any issue with that. But it's like, if they shut up, then what's going to happen to the voice? There has to be a voice of criticism. There has to be judgment. But I think there has to be judgment with compassion. Sweeten the judgments. But no, we have to criticize, we have to judge. Nobody would be in this room if we did, if we didn't practice judgment. It'd be like spiritual diabetes. You can't run around thinking good of things that are not good.